The day they mocked me wasn't the day I broke, it was the day I started planning how to take everything back. My name is Daniel Hayes. For years, I was the quiet one in the corner office at Blackridge & Company, a finance firm built on sharp suits and sharper lies. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't the life of the after-work parties. I didn't play golf with the executives or laugh at the CEO's bad jokes. I just worked, long hours, flawless reports, calculations that saved clients millions. But none of that mattered. Not when Marcus Vance was in the room. Marcus was everything I wasn't: loud, charming, arrogant. He had a smile polished enough to blind anyone who looked too closely, and the board adored him. They called him a visionary. I called him what he really was, the parasite. He took my work, my ideas, my successes, and packaged them as his own. I was the ghostwriter of his career, and no one seemed to notice. Or care. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. The paycheck cleared. The numbers balanced. But then came the meeting. It was a quarterly review in front of the full board. I had spent weeks preparing the risk analysis that Marcus was now presenting as if he'd written every word himself. I sat in silence, hands folded, waiting for a chance to speak. Then it happened. One of the executives, half drunk on power and too much scotch, looked directly at me and laughed. "Dan? Please. He's just Marcus's assistant. Without Vance, he'd be useless." The room erupted in chuckles. Marcus didn't correct them. He didn't defend me. He laughed, too. The man I'd built a career under, the man I thought was my ally, smirked as the board mocked me like I was a joke. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I smiled, too, not because it was funny, but because I realized something they hadn't. Marcus needed me. The firm needed me. Every visionary speech Marcus gave was stitched together from the spreadsheets I built in silence. Every deal that made them rich was balanced on formulas only I understood. They mocked me, dismissed me, erased me. But I was the foundation of their empire. That night, I went home, poured myself a glass of whiskey, and stared at the skyline I had helped keep standing. The laughter from the boardroom still rang in my ears, but instead of breaking me, it hardened me. Because what they didn't realize was simple: if you build your kingdom on the back of a man you call useless, you'd better pray he never learns how much power he truly holds. And as I shut down my computer, I caught my reflection in the darkened screen. My own eyes looked back at me, colder, sharper than before. For the first time, I wasn't wondering if I should fight back. I was wondering how. The boardroom laughter didn't fade easily. It clung to me like smoke, even weeks later. Outwardly, I kept my head down, crunching numbers, balancing accounts, cleaning up the mistakes no one else even noticed. But inside, something sharp and restless had begun to stir. At first, the warning signs came quietly, like whispers you almost convince yourself you imagined. I noticed Marcus's reports getting suspiciously polished. Too polished. He'd present them as his own, but they had my fingerprints all over them, formulas I had created, phrases I had written in memos, the subtle formatting quirks I used out of habit. When I asked about it, he smirked and said, "Don't be paranoid, Dan. Numbers belong to the firm, not to you." But it didn't stop there. Opportunities one was promised began to vanish. A promotion I had been shortlisted for suddenly didn't exist anymore. A project I'd spearheaded was reassigned, straight into Marcus's lap. I was told I was too valuable where I was to move up, as if being stuck cleaning up everyone else's mess was some kind of honor. Then came the favoritism. Marcus had the ear of the CEO, the board, even the junior staff who wanted to ride his coattails. He took them out for drinks, charmed them with stories, made them laugh. Me? I was invisible at best, expendable at worst. When clients praised the accuracy of my reports, Marcus intercepted the emails and forwarded them along with his name attached. Every time I tried to push back, I was painted as the problem. Too intense. Too negative. Too difficult. They told me to lighten up. To be more like Marcus. The strain started to eat away at me. Nights grew longer, my apartment darker. I'd sit at my desk staring at the skyline, wondering if I was imagining it all. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe I really was just the assistant in the shadows, a ghost in Marcus's empire. But then came the moment that erased all doubt. One evening, I stayed late to finish a reconciliation Marcus had forgotten to handle. As I sifted through digital ledgers, I found a trail that didn't belong. Subtle inconsistencies. Money that didn't add up. Transactions rerouted through shell accounts. And at the center of it all, Marcus's signature of approval. I leaned back in my chair, blood cold. It wasn't just stolen credit or favoritism anymore, this was something darker. Something dangerous. Just as I started saving the files to my drive, the office door creaked open. Marcus stood there, smiling, too casual for someone who'd supposedly left hours ago. "Burning the midnight oil again, Dan?" he asked, his voice smooth but his eyes sharp, like a blade testing its edge. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. For the first time, I realized Marcus wasn't just undermining me. He was watching me. Betrayal doesn't come with a warning, it hits like a hammer, sudden and crushing. And Marcus delivered mine in a way so precise, so calculated, that I realized he'd been setting the stage for months. It happened during the quarterly client summit, the kind of event where the firm paraded its visionaries in tailored suits to impress the investors. I had worked day and night preparing the financial models, forecasting trends, and patching the holes Marcus conveniently ignored. My fingerprints were on every number, every chart, every line. But when I walked into that marble-floored conference room, the stage didn't have my name anywhere on it. It had his. Marcus stood under the spotlight, my graphs blown up on the screen behind him. He delivered the presentation I had built word for word, down to the exact phrasing of my notes. Except now, he'd twisted it. Instead of exposing the inconsistencies I had flagged, he painted them as my errors. "Unfortunately," Marcus said, his voice calm, smooth, convincing, "we discovered mistakes in Daniel Hayes's reconciliations. Critical ones. If I hadn't caught them, we'd be looking at millions in losses." The words struck harder than the laughter in the boardroom weeks earlier. Clients shifted in their seats, murmuring. Executives frowned. I felt every eye on me, burning, judging. I wanted to shout, to expose the truth, but then Marcus unveiled the evidence. Altered files, doctored spreadsheets, numbers I had never seen but bore my digital signature. Proof, they called it. Lies, I knew. And then came the final blow. To protect the firm, we've decided to remove Mr. Hayes from all client-facing responsibilities. Effective immediately. Gasps echoed. I froze. Remove me? From the very work that held the company together? The CEO nodded solemnly, like a judge passing sentence. We can't afford liabilities. Marcus, thank you for catching this. The room applauded him. Applauded my executioner. I sat there, numb, my hands trembling under the table. Years of sacrifice, of silence, of cleaning up their messes, and now I was branded the incompetent, the weak link, the man who nearly tanked the firm. My reputation shattered in an instant. As the applause faded, I caught Marcus's eyes across the room. He wasn't smiling wide, just the faint curl of lips that said, checkmate. I left the building in a haze, my reflection in the glass doors warped and hollow. The city buzzed around me, alive and uncaring. Shock bled into anger. Anger bled into heartbreak. And beneath it all, a cold realization began to take shape. Marcus hadn't just mocked me. He had stolen everything, my work, my credibility, my future. But as I stood in the night air, fists clenched so tight my nails cut into my skin, one thought echoed louder than the rest. If the day they mocked me was the day I broke, then maybe it was also the day I would take everything back. The days after the summit felt like drowning. Every headline in the finance world echoed Marcus's narrative: rising partner saves firm from colleagues' oversight. My name was dragged through articles and whispers, stamped as incompetent, reckless, even dangerous. I stayed in my apartment with the blinds shut, the city lights nothing but blurred streaks against the glass. Emails from clients vanished. Calls from colleagues stopped. Friends in the firm didn't check in, except for one, an intern I had mentored, Claire. She left a voice message one night. Her tone was shaky, careful. "Daniel, I know what they're saying isn't true. I saw Marcus editing files in your office after hours. I didn't know what he was doing until now. Please, don't let him get away with this." Her words cut through the fog of despair like a flare in the dark. She saw him. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't careless. I was betrayed. The numbness inside me began to splinter. My mind replayed every late night I'd spent fixing Marcus's errors, every time he'd forgotten to CC me in emails, every time he positioned himself closer to the partners while I stayed in the shadows. He hadn't just mocked me, he had dismantled me, piece by piece, preparing for this public execution. But Claire's message sparked something I thought I'd lost: clarity. I opened my laptop, hands shaking, and combed through backup drives, old project folders, security logs I had once ignored. At first, it felt like searching for ghosts. But then I found them via timestamps that didn't align, edits traced to Marcus's login, discrepancies between original files and the ones he had presented. They weren't mistakes. They were sabotage. The despair that had chained me down began to shift into something heavier, sharper. Anger, cold, deliberate, alive. I looked at the mirror on my desk, at the hollow version of myself staring back. My tie was gone, my hair unkempt, eyes bloodshot. For the first time in years, I didn't see the obedient, quiet number cruncher who let others walk over him. I saw a man who had nothing left to lose. And that made me dangerous. I whispered the words aloud, tasting their finality. They mocked me. They broke me. Now I'll take everything back. It wasn't a vow shouted in rage. It was quiet, steady, deadly certain. The kind of promise that doesn't burn out, it burns through. The transformation had begun. Revenge, I learned, is less a lightning strike than an engineered collapse. It required patience, proof, and people who weren't afraid to pull the curtain back. I stopped thinking like a scapegoat and started thinking like an architect of ruin. Step 1: secure the evidence. I dug through every backup drive I'd ever made, old code branches, archived reports, email drafts stamped with timestamps only I could place. Claire dug through access logs from the firm's internal servers. She found login attempts at odd hours tied to Marcus's profile. I uncovered copies of presentations where my original charts had been switched for doctored versions. Each file I pulled together became a bead on a string I planned to pull tight around him. Step 2: recruit allies. Claire was my first lifeline. She'd seen Marcus in the act and wasn't willing to look away anymore. Then there was Sam, an old college friend who now ran a boutique cybersecurity firm. He owed me a favor from a long-ago internship I recommended him for. Sam verified the authenticity of the files and created tamper-proof forensic copies. Finally, I reached out to Elena, a freelance investigative journalist I'd admired, blunt and fearless. She smelled a story and, more importantly, had the platform to make noise. Step 3: craft the bait. Marcus had always loved the thrill of being first to scoop a supposed vulnerability. We made a leak, a plausible-looking draft of a major client acquisition with a glaring error we pretended to have missed. The mock file was seated in a folder only accessible to the inner circle. If Marcus couldn't resist, the trap would capture him red-handed, exact timestamps, IP addresses, a live feed of his actions. Sam built a covert recorder that logged every keystroke and screen capture the moment the file was opened. Step 4. Build the exit ramps. Elena lined up contacts at regulatory bodies and prepared an exclusive exposé that would drop concurrent with our legal notifications. We prepared a packet for key clients, clean, indisputable copies of my original work, and a concise timeline showing Marcus's pattern of theft and manipulation. Everything had to be synchronized. If we leaked too early or too late, Marcus's PR machine would strangle the narrative. Meanwhile, Marcus continued to bask in the light. He promoted himself at conferences, sent congratulatory emails to clients with his signature flourish, and posted smug photos from lavish dinners. He sounded untouchable, confident, cocky, proud. He had no idea a slow-acting charge had been planted beneath his feet. We tested the bait on a Tuesday. Notifications rolled in, one internal access, then another. Sam whispered that the IP matched the firm's executive pool. My heart pounded, adrenaline and dread tangled together. Elena set the live feed for the coming Friday when Marcus would be presenting a new vision to investors. Everything was in place, evidence authenticated, allies ready, legal letters drafted, and the bait laid like a trapdoor. I sat at my kitchen table that night with the forensic file open, hands poised over the keyboard. The launch sequence was simple and irreversible: one encrypted upload to Elena, one press of the send button to regulators, one simultaneous release to clients and the press. My finger hovered. The city hummed outside, indifferent. Then my phone buzzed. A calendar invite popped up, unmarked, Marcus, quick chat. He was asking to meet. Everything we'd built fell into motion like a gear finally catching its teeth. Friday morning, the world still smelled of stale coffee and ambition. Marcus swaggered into the investor forum in a tailored suit, his confidence a live wire. He didn't know Elena was waiting in the wings with a room full of cameras, or that regulators were monitoring the feed in real time. He didn't know Claire had already handed forensic packets to 3 key clients. He didn't know Sam's recorder had captured him, in his own words, opening the bait file at 2:13 a.m. and copying the evidence he'd paraded as proof. Marcus began his speech, slick, rehearsed, the same lines he'd used for years. Then Elena's live feed cut through the auditorium like a siren, a split screen, Marcus at the podium, and on the other side, a scrolling timeline of his edits, keystrokes, and the recorded footage of him manipulating files. The room went from polite applause to stunned silence in a heartbeat. He tried to laugh it off. This is about a disgruntled former employee, he stammered, voice pitched to command the room. But the tape kept playing. There was Marcus, hunched over a keyboard in the dead of night, his company-issued phone pinging as he typed. There were emails showing him rerouting payments through shell accounts. There were internal memos where he'd instructed HR to quietly reassign anyone getting too close to the truth. Phones lit up. Clients called legal counsel. The first investor whispered the word every executive dreads: withdraw. The tickers on the financial newsfeed began to dip. Marcus's PR team scrambled, but Elena unfolded the dossier with surgical calm, authenticated commits proving Daniel's authorship, timestamps proving Marcus's access, and a neatly compiled timeline showing a decade of theft disguised as mentorship. She read the emails out loud. She let Claire testify on camera, voice small but steady, recounting the nights she'd seen Marcus in Daniel's office. Sam provided the forensic analysis, showing how logs had been tampered with to frame Daniel. It became cinematic and terrible, watching a man disassemble himself with the same arrogance he'd used to build his myth. The board convened behind the stage, their faces were masks until they weren't. Within hours, Marcus was suspended pending an independent investigation. Regulators froze accounts. Major clients paused contracts. Lawsuits were filed. Sponsors walked away. The firm's stock plunged as headlines screamed betrayal. Marcus fought lawyers, denials, a frantic late-night press conference, but every lie he told was undercut by a new piece of evidence Elena released. The final blow came when auditors traced irregular payments directly to accounts Marcus controlled. For the first time, his calm cracked. Cameras caught it, the smirk slipping, the composure folding, eyes darting to doors he'd once walked through with entitlement. When security escorted him from the building, it wasn't ceremonial. It was the sound of power unstitched, his office cleared, plaques removed, his name scrubbed from the partnership page. Reporters shouted questions he could no longer answer. Investors canceled meetings. The man who had mocked Daniel in a marble boardroom now walked past the same marble, shoulders bowed beneath the weight of everything he'd stolen. I watched it all from the server room, monitors humming, proof open on the screen I'd once used to save their empire. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I let the evidence do the speaking. As Marcus disappeared into a waiting car, cameras following like vultures, something quiet settled in my chest, relief, yes, but sharper, a satisfaction that felt like the final click of a lock sliding shut. They had mocked me once. Today they watched as I took it all back. The storm Marcus unleashed ended faster than anyone expected, but the wreckage he left behind was monumental. The firm scrambled in the aftermath. Clients pulled deals, investors demanded accountability, and the board issued a public apology. For weeks, headlines dragged Marcus through every channel. Executive fraud rocks financial giant. Star partner exposed as saboteur. The fall of Marcus Reed. His carefully curated image of brilliance and stability crumbled into nothing more than a cautionary tale. Regulators froze his assets. Lawsuits piled up, corporate, civil, even criminal. The man who once mocked me in front of an applauding room now stood trial, facing years of prison time. Cameras captured him entering the courthouse in a cheap gray suit, hair unkempt, eyes hollow. No spotlight, no applause, just the flash of cameras that marked the end of a career and the beginning of a punishment. And me? For the first time in years, I felt free. The board called me back in, not to scold, not to silence, but to apologize. They offered reinstatement, even a promotion, claiming they'd been misled. I didn't take it. The thought of returning to those halls, those marble floors that once swallowed my dignity, made me sick. I had no need to prove myself to them anymore. My proof was already carved into Marcus's downfall. Instead, I walked away. With Elena's story exploding across media outlets, I was approached by firms and startups who respected not just my work, but my integrity. Offers poured in, but I chose carefully, aligning myself with people who valued truth over spectacle. For the first time, my name carried weight on its own. Not as Marcus's shadow, not as the scapegoat they tried to break, but as someone who had stared down betrayal and lived to rise above it. Claire joined me, leaving the firm to help me build something new, an agency built on transparency, a place where no one would ever be erased the way I was. Together, we turned what had once been my humiliation into a legacy. Sometimes I still think back to that night, standing outside the firm, fists clenched and broken, when I whispered that I'd take everything back. I didn't just take back my name, my reputation, my dignity. I took back control of my story. And Marcus? He has nothing left but the echo of applause that died the moment the truth came to light. Poetic justice is this: the day they mocked me was the day they unknowingly handed me the match, and I burned down their lies. Speech balloon. Now I'll turn to you, the viewer. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, at work, in family, or among friends? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story gripped you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales of betrayal, justice, and revenge. Because sometimes, the best endings are the ones no one sees coming.